Imagine this for a moment. It's 3 a.m., you're lying in bed wide awake, staring at the ceiling while your brain runs through every worst-case financial scenario imaginable. Your car could suddenly break down. Your laptop might stop working. You could lose your job. Maybe your pet needs urgent medical care. Sound familiar? Now, what if I told you there is a specific amount of money that could almost erase these late-night worries and completely change the way you move through life? Most people assume financial milestones are random numbers created by wealthy people just to make everyone else feel behind. But here's the truth. There's real psychology and math behind why certain financial checkpoints dramatically shift your daily reality. And the first life-changing number isn't $1 million or even $100,000. It's $10,000. My name is Neek, and I spend an unusual amount of time thinking about money, human behavior, and why some people seem to handle financial problems with ease, while others feel overwhelmed by their bank balance. If you've ever wondered what life actually feels like at different levels of savings and how each step changes your choices, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like if it brings you clarity. Before we get into why $10,000 is so powerful, let me show you what life looks like without it. You know that moment at the grocery store when you're mentally adding up your items, trying to decide whether you can afford the name brand cereal, or if you should buy the cheaper version that tastes like cardboard. Or when friends invite you to dinner, and you invent a polite excuse because spending $25 on a meal would throw off your entire weekly budget? That's the everyday reality for millions of people living paycheck to paycheck. Every financial choice feels like a careful calculation. Every unexpected bill feels like a potential crisis. You're constantly reacting instead of being able to plan ahead. But here's where things get interesting. Something shifts inside you once you save your first $10,000, and it has nothing to do with buying luxury items. In fact, most people who reach this milestone barely change their spending at all. The transformation is much more subtle and far more powerful. The first thing that changes is how you experience risk. When you have no savings, every decision feels risky. Switching jobs, relocating, even planning a vacation becomes stressful because one bad move could ruin you financially. But when you have $10,000 in your account, those same choices suddenly feel manageable. You're not quitting your job to join the circus, but you finally feel confident enough to ask for that raise or invest in a course that could increase your income. A safety cushion doesn't make you reckless. It simply lets you think beyond survival. There's also a chemical change that happens when you see a 5-figure balance for the first time. Studies show that financial security lowers cortisol, your main stress hormone. So reaching $10,000 doesn't just alter your finances, it literally changes how your body responds to stress. Think about the last time your car had a minor issue. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, that check engine light feels like a countdown to disaster. But with $10,000 saved, it's just an inconvenience. Annoying, yes, but not terrifying. That shift from panic to irritation might look small, but it affects your entire life. When money stress disappears, you sleep better, make clearer decisions, perform better at work, and show more patience with the people around you. Financial anxiety drains mental energy, and removing it frees up space to actually improve your situation. Here's something most people never consider about the $10,000 milestone. The biggest benefit isn't spending the money, it's knowing it exists. This is what financial experts call the emergency fund effect, and it's one of the most underrated ideas in personal finance. An emergency fund isn't really about emergencies, it's about peace of mind. Most people who save $10,000 never actually use it for true emergencies. Instead, they use it for opportunities. Education, business ideas, moving to better locations, or simply having the mental clarity to focus on earning more. There's also a confidence shift that's difficult to explain but impossible to ignore. When you have real savings, you interact with the world differently, you negotiate better. You walk away from bad situations more easily because you're not desperate. That confidence often leads to better jobs, better relationships, and better outcomes overall. You might be thinking $10,000 feels impossible, especially when I struggle to save $100 a month. But here's the psychological twist. The hardest part isn't saving the money, it's becoming the kind of person who saves. Most people treat saving like a crash diet, extreme cuts, intense discipline, and then burnout. But people who successfully reach $10,000 don't treat saving as temporary, they treat it as a new identity. Once you see yourself as someone who saves, your behavior naturally changes. You notice ways to cut expenses. You get creative about earning extra income. You think long-term instead of chasing instant gratification. The process gets easier over time. The first $1,000 feels painful, but after that, the habits kick in. By the time you're saving your fifth or 6,000, it feels automatic. There's also a mathematical truth. $10,000 can cover most unexpected expenses that ruin people financially: car repairs, medical bills, sudden job loss, or family emergencies. After hitting this milestone, you're protected from most of the disasters that trap people in the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. But maybe the biggest change is how you view money. Before savings, money feels limited. Every dollar spent is gone forever. But with a $10,000 base, you start to understand that money can grow. This is when people start exploring investing, side income, and long-term planning, not because they suddenly became financial experts, but because they finally have the mental space to think beyond survival. Here's a surprising truth. The person with $10,000 saved is actually closer to financial freedom than someone earning twice their income, but saving nothing. Because wealth isn't about how much you earn, it's about how much you keep. We all know people making six-figure salaries who are always broke because they spend everything. And we all know modest earners who steadily build savings. The difference is mindset, not income. Saving your first $10,000 is a masterclass in developing the right money mindset. Knowing your needs versus wants, controlling spending without feeling deprived, and learning patience, one of the most valuable financial skills. Now let's talk practical impact. $10,000 can handle nearly any common car repair. Most issues cost between $500 and $3,000. Medical surprises are manageable too. You won't pay for major surgery, but most small procedures or emergency visits fit within that range. Job loss becomes survivable. You now have 3 to 6 months of breathing room, depending on your lifestyle. That space gives you the luxury of choosing a job, not just taking the first offer. Here's where it gets exciting. $10,000 doesn't just protect you from problems, it opens doors. Maybe you find a course that costs $2,000 but could increase your salary. Without savings, you can't afford it. With savings, it's a smart move. Maybe a friend is launching a business and needs a small investor. Without savings, you're left out. With savings, you have options. And options create possibilities. There's also a huge mental benefit. People with emergency funds sleep better. Studies show that financial worry is one of the top causes of insomnia. Remove the stress, and sleep quality improves immediately. Your relationships benefit too. Money issues cause arguments and tension. When you aren't constantly stressed about bills, you show up differently with more patience, more attention, and less irritability. And that confidence boost, it matters. Walking into a job interview when you're not desperate changes everything. You negotiate differently. You think clearly. And that often leads to better pay and better roles, which grows your savings faster, a positive cycle. Now let's be real. $10,000 may feel huge if you're barely saving anything, but you don't build it overnight. The most successful savers start with tiny amounts: $25 a month, $50 a month. The key is consistency. Once the habit is established, you can increase the amount. Here's the wild part. The average American spends over $3,000 a year on coffee, eating out, and convenience purchases. Redirect just a fraction of that, and you'd save $10,000 in under 3 years. Saving $10,000 is less about income and more about awareness and intention. The long-term effect of having $10,000 goes far beyond just covering emergencies. It changes the way you see risk, opportunity, and your future. Most importantly, it proves to yourself that you can hit financial goals, which makes bigger goals feel achievable. Once you reach $10,000, you start thinking differently about your next financial milestone, then the next. And before long, you're on the path to financial independence, not because of luck, but because your habits and mindset naturally push you forward. The biggest transformation isn't the money, it's who you become while saving it. And that shift influences every part of your life. Let's talk about decision fatigue, which sounds like corporate jargon, but is actually real. Every day, you make dozens of small money decisions: generic or name brand pasta, pack lunch or buy lunch, regular or premium gas. When you're broke, each decision matters. And by the end of the day, your brain is exhausted. But when you have $10,000 saved, 90% of these decisions disappear. You're no longer buying the cheaper option out of necessity, you're choosing based on preference. That frees up a huge amount of mental energy. Someone once told me the first time they shopped for groceries after hitting $10,000 in savings, they almost cried. Not because they bought luxury items, but because they finally felt free to think about what they wanted instead of what they could afford. Does $10,000 make you wealthy? No, it doesn't mean you can quit your job or start living extravagantly. But it gives you breathing room, and breathing room is the foundation of smart financial choices. When you're not drowning financially, you notice ways to save more, like better insurance rates or cheaper phone plans. Small optimizations add up, making your next financial goal even easier. Here's a psychological twist. When you have no savings, every dollar feels precious. But when you have $10,000, individual dollars feel less terrifying to part with, so you're more willing to spend on things that increase your earning potential. A $50 networking event feels expensive when you're broke. But with savings, it feels like an investment. That one event might lead to a connection that boosts your salary. This is why people often see sudden career growth after building savings, not because money magically creates success, but because financial security removes fear and opens the door to opportunity. There's also an overlooked social aspect. When you're always stressed about money, it affects how you interact with others. You avoid going out, you feel embarrassed. You withdraw. Maybe you even resent people who seem more stable. So here's the bottom line. $10,000 isn't just a number, it's a mental transformation. It changes how you sleep, how you work, how you make decisions, and how you interact with the world. If your current balance feels discouraging, don't panic. Start small, stay consistent, and remember this. The person you become while saving your first $10,000 is more valuable than the money itself.